Hello, I'm Larry Lee with Brownfield Ag News. Geoff Cooper is president and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association. Geoff, you've been battling with the Renewable Fuel Association to fight the oil industry on these waivers for quite some time. And now, with the help of 15 senators, it looks like they're trying again.
Well, they're trying something a little different this time, Larry. We know that the oil industry has been trying for the last several years to get small refinery waivers, and the courts have thrown those out. So now they're shifting their focus and they're attempting to get all refinery waivers. And they've asked EPA Administrator Wheeler to just waive the 2021 renewable fuel standard requirements for all oil refiners, supposedly because of the impact of COVID-19 on fuel demand.
Now, I looked at the letter from the senators, and I have to admit there were some things in there that puzzled me a little bit, and maybe you too. First of all, it appears to ask EPA to forget about past blending obligations and also to keep ignoring the blending requirements using COVID as their reason. It seems like they just want to forget about the past year.
Well, it is pretty remarkable to read the letter, and effectively what these senators are doing is asking EPA to ignore the law and ignore case law and court decisions that have come down the last several years. And by the way, let's just sweep that 4 billion gallons of lost RFS demand from the last few years under the rug. That's what they're asking EPA to do, and we think it's just ridiculous that a group of senators would be so brazen in asking an agency to willfully ignore the law and some court decisions that came out as recently as this January.
Letter. Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to keep fighting this. Obviously, we think EPA should take one quick look at this letter from these senators and reject this request. They've received similar waiver requests from other senators, other governors earlier this year. And again, the law is very clear on this. The only way that EPA can grant a general waiver of the RFS is if the petitioner, which in this case would be these senators, can demonstrate that the renewable fuel standard itself is causing severe harm to the economy. And there is no way that these senators or anyone else could make that demonstration. We know that the RFS and the ethanol industry is benefiting the economy, and implementation of the 15 billion gallon statutory volume would have even greater benefits to the economy and the environment. So this is just another attempt by the refiners and by their supporters in Congress to try and undermine the renewable fuel standard. This time they're using COVID-19 as sort of an opportunistic excuse to go after the RFS. But it's really nothing more than just another attempt to try and tear down what's been a very successful program.
One thing that stood out to me in the letter is the part that says Congress has not provided clear statutory authority to reallocate exempted volumes. And they go on to say any reallocation will result in all refiners, regardless of size, facing higher obligation levels than are called for in the statute. And when I look at that, I'm thinking, well, if they were already required to blend these volumes and they have to do it at the same time as the current volumes, whose fault is that?
Well, that's absolutely right, and they're wrong. The statute, the law itself is very clear that EPA must enforce the volumes that appear in the law. And the law for since 2015, at least for conventional renewable fuels like ethanol, corn ethanol, has said 15 billion gallons. Unfortunately, EPA has never enforced that 15 billion gallon level, and so we've ended up with these shortfalls. And now they're complaining about the prospect of needing to make that up. So you're exactly right. If they're concerned about blending, being required to blend levels that are higher than what appears in the statute, they probably should have thought about that when they were asking for these waivers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. The bottom line is the law lays out the volumes, and the refiners are obligated to blend those volumes year in, year out. If they haven't done that in the past, they need to make up for it moving forward.
Something else in the letter that stood out to me, and maybe I'm oversimplifying the math on this, but I'll let you comment on it. They say if the fuel demand drops because of COVID, it would be a problem, but my question is, if the blending requirements stay the same, so much ethanol per gallon of
Right.
gasoline, wouldn't that effectively meet their request to uh, share the economic hardships associated with COVID?
It absolutely does, Larry. The renewable fuel standard volumes are translated into a percentage every year. And so every gallon of gasoline, every gallon of diesel fuel is obligated to be blended with a certain percentage of renewable fuel, whether that's ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, whatever else. And so if overall demand for gasoline falls, like it did because of COVID, so too does the level of required renewable fuel blending, again, because it's a percentage of what actual consumption is. So we are already, bearing the burden, or in fact, we're taking the brunt of the burden in terms of lost fuel demand because of COVID-19. They complain in the letter about, oil refineries saw their run rates fall as low as 70%, and 30% of refining capacity was offline at one point. Well, that would have been pretty good in our industry if it had only gotten that bad. We at one point had more than half of our industry's capacity offline. 53% of our capacity was sitting idle at the height of the pandemic's impact on fuel demand. So, bottom line is COVID-19 has been rough on everyone in the energy sector, but that is not an excuse to walk away from the renewable fuel standard and allow the refiners to get out of their legal obligations.
So, in your opinion, the senator's request for a more equal sharing of the economic hardship is pretty much hogwash.
It is hogwash. We've been unequally sharing the brunt of EPA's mismanagement of the RFS for years now. We have lost billions of gallons of RFS requirements because of small refinery exemptions, because of illegally, applied general waivers. So this notion that, we need everybody to share in the impact of COVID-19 just doesn't hold much water with us. We've been on the losing end of this administration's management of the RFS for 4 years now, and we don't see any reason why the refiners should be let out of their legal obligations to blend renewable fuels.
Any hint as to what EPA and the administration might do following this letter, or so far quiet?
Well, again, there are very high standards when it comes to granting these waivers. EPA has received general waiver requests in the past. They got one from Rick Perry when he was the governor of Texas. There was another group of governors that submitted a waiver request around 2012, 2013 during the drought. EPA denied those requests and said, no, the law is pretty clear. So, EPA's own past practices and the court decisions that have been out there would suggest that EPA really has no choice but to deny this current waiver request from these senators. Now, whether, what they do exactly in terms of next steps remains to be seen. And I think, we're not expecting to see anything happen related to the RFS in the next 2 weeks between now and the election. But, following the election, who knows? I think we're going to be prepared for anything.
Looking at the election, does RFA have a preference as to who wins?
We don't endorse candidates. We don't, pick and choose. Luckily for us, both candidates have expressed strong support for ethanol and for the renewable fuel standard. We've seen President Trump's track record on E15, what he did with year-round approval. He's lately been out talking about allowing existing infrastructure to be used to distribute E15. That would be a game changer if we're actually able to do that. And former Vice President Biden, similarly has expressed strong support for the RFS. He's come out very aggressively on the small refinery exemption issue and really made an issue out of that, and has committed that if he's elected, he's going to put an end to these exemptions day one in office. So, we've been happy to see those expressions of support. What it really comes down to, though, Larry, as you know, is who does the president put around them? Who is leading the EPA? Who's leading the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and who's holding some of these really influential, important positions within the administration?
Let's look at this time of year. We're supposedly coming out of COVID-19 rather slowly, but we're still coming out of it. How is the industry doing in the recovery stage?
Well, I would say the industry is recovering. We have made significant progress in sort of returning to where we were in terms of production and demand prior to COVID, but we've still got a ways to go. And in fact, we've been really anywhere between 10 and 15% below year ago levels in terms of production and demand for ethanol. We haven't quite climbed out of that hole that COVID put us in. But we have seen a steady recovery. We've seen, a lot of those plants that were temporarily idled and shut down have returned to production. We have seen margins return to the black side of the ledger. They're still pretty thin, but at least our industry is making some money again. Exports remain slow and below normal. So demand is still soft, but I think our industry has responded to that by appropriately adjusting supply and reducing output. Of course, the downside of that is we do still have a number of facilities that are idle or operating far below normal operating rates. We do still have lots of workers that are furloughed or working part-time instead of full-time. So we have a ways to go, but I would say things are much better today, Larry, than they were back in the spring when we were right in the thick of the pandemic's impact on fuel demand.
Is there anything you'd like to add today, Geoff?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground, Larry, and appreciate the conversation.
Geoff Cooper is President and CEO of the Renewable Fuels Association. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.